Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars through the main screen. His ship had been exploring space near Proxima Station for 3 weeks now, and nothing exciting had happened until today. The sensors were picking up something big moving toward them from the edge of the solar system. "Sir, we have a massive object approaching from Sector 7, said Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez from his position at the communications console. His voice carried a note of worry that made everyone on the bridge turn to look at him. Sam had been with the crew for 2 years, and he never sounded worried about anything. Jake moved closer to the main screen and squinted at the readings. The object was huge and moving faster than any human ship could travel. It was also sending out signals that their computers could not understand. Dr. Lisa Murphy rushed onto the bridge carrying her data pad and looking excited about something. "Commander, I have been studying those signals and they are definitely from an intelligent species," she said while pulling up charts on her device. Lisa was the best xenobiologist in the human fleet, and if she said the signals were from aliens, then Jake believed her without question. The massive shape finally came into view on their main screen, and everyone on the bridge went quiet. The alien ship was 3 times larger than any human vessel and covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with their own light. Its design was unlike anything humans had ever built, with curves and spikes that looked both beautiful and threatening at the same time. "Open a communication channel," Jake ordered, but before Sam could respond, the alien ship was already sending them a message. The voice that came through their speakers was deep and mechanical and spoke perfect English, which surprised everyone. "I am Admiral Zekthul of the HFY Empire," the voice announced with authority that made Jake feel small. "You will identify yourselves and explain why you dare to travel in space that belongs to our domain." Jake stepped forward and tried to keep his voice steady. "This is Commander Jake Harrison of the United Earth ship Defiance. We are explorers from the human species, and we mean no harm to you or your people." There was a long pause before Admiral Zekthul spoke again, and when he did, his tone was filled with something that sounded like amusement. "Humans," he said slowly as if testing the word. "We have conquered 47 species across this galaxy, and none have been as primitive as yours. Your technology is weak, and your ships are slow and fragile." Lisa stepped closer to Jake and whispered something about the way the aliens communicated. She had noticed that their signals came in patterns that suggested multiple minds working together as one. This gave her an idea about how their society might work, but she needed more time to study the data. "We do not wish to fight with your empire," Jake said to the alien admiral. "Perhaps we can find a way to coexist peacefully in this galaxy." Admiral Zekthul made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace is for species that have something to offer in return. You have nothing we need, and your presence in our space is an insult to our superiority. I will give you exactly 72 hours to gather all human ships and surrender to our forces." The communication ended, and Jake felt his heart sink. He knew that humanity had spread across 12 star systems and built colonies on dozens of worlds. They had been so proud of their progress and growth, but now they faced an enemy that made them look like children playing with toys. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Lieutenant Rodriguez, and Jake could hear the fear in his voice. The young officer had a wife and 2 children back on Earth, and Jake knew he was thinking about them right now. "Send an emergency message to Earth and all human colonies," Jake replied. "Tell them about the HFY Empire and their ultimatum. Every human ship needs to know what we are facing." Dr. Murphy was still studying her data and making notes about the alien signals. She looked up at Jake with an expression of deep thought. "Commander, I think I might have found something important about how these aliens think and communicate. Their minds seem to work differently than ours in ways that might be significant." Jake nodded and told her to continue her research while he tried to figure out how humanity could possibly survive against such a powerful enemy. The Kethvar had superior technology and had already conquered dozens of other species. What chance did humans have against an empire that controlled so much of the galaxy? As the alien ship moved away from them, Jake wondered if this would be the last time he saw stars as a free human being. In 72 hours he might be dead, or enslaved by an alien empire that saw his species as nothing more than primitive insects. But something in Lisa's voice gave him a small amount of hope that maybe humans had something the Kethvar did not expect. The emergency message from Commander Harrison reached Earth in 18 hours and caused panic across all human space. General Patricia Webb stood in the war room surrounded by military officers and scientists who all looked terrified. The Kethvar Empire was moving ships toward human colonies, and their ultimatum was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Dr. Alex Chen arrived at the meeting carrying files about alien psychology and human brain patterns. He had spent years studying how different minds worked, and now his research might be the key to saving humanity. Alex looked tired from traveling non-stop from his laboratory, but his eyes were bright with an idea that could change everything. General Webb, I have been analyzing the data that Dr. Murphy sent us about Kethvar communication patterns, Alex said while spreading his papers across the table. These aliens appear to have what we call a collective consciousness. All their minds are connected, and they share thoughts and experiences instantly. Colonel Ryan Foster leaned forward to study the papers. Ryan was the best military strategist in the human fleet, and he understood that conventional warfare would not work against the Kethvar. Their ships were too powerful, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. Dr. Chen, are you saying that every Kethvar thinks the same thoughts? Ryan asked while pointing to the brain pattern charts. How is that even possible for a living species to evolve? Alex nodded and pulled out more research about hive mind species. Many insects on Earth work this way, but never on such an advanced level. The Kethvar have created a perfect society where every individual knows exactly what to do at all times. There is no confusion or disagreement because they all share the same mind. General Webb studied the information and began to understand what Alex was suggesting. Doctor, are you telling me that this collective consciousness might also be a weakness that we can exploit somehow? Exactly, Alex replied with excitement in his voice. A mind that has never experienced individual thought might not be able to handle the chaos of human consciousness. Our brains work in ways that would seem completely random and unpredictable to them. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez had been transferred to Earth to help with the communication analysis. He worked with a team of specialists to decode more Kethvar signals, and what they found was disturbing. The alien empire was moving massive fleets toward human space, and they would arrive in less than 60 hours. Captain Betty Walsh commanded a destroyer squadron near the Tau Ceti system, and she was the first to encounter Kethvar warships. Her 3 ships were completely outmatched, but she managed to send valuable data about enemy tactics before her squadron was destroyed. Betty died along with her entire crew, but her sacrifice gave humanity crucial information about how the Kethvar fought. Dr. Chen worked with Colonel Foster to develop what they called Operation Mindbreak. The plan was dangerous and had never been attempted before, but it might be humanity's only chance for survival. They would try to broadcast human thoughts directly into Kethvar communication networks and see if the chaos of individual consciousness could disrupt their collective mind. We need volunteers who are willing to have their thoughts transmitted to the enemy, Alex explained to a room full of military personnel. This process could be dangerous, and we do not know what effects it might have on human subjects. Private. Danny Cooper stepped forward first. Danny was a war veteran who had fought in the Mars Rebellion and suffered from terrible nightmares about the battles he had experienced. He understood that his traumatic memories might be exactly what they needed to confuse the alien collective consciousness. Doctor, I have been living with chaos in my head for years, Danny said with a sad smile. If my broken mind can help save humanity, then I volunteer to be your first test subject. Maria Santos also volunteered for the experiment. She was an artist who painted and wrote music and poetry all at the same time. Maria's creative process was so chaotic that even other humans had trouble following her thought patterns. Alex believed that her artistic mind might be the perfect weapon against the ordered thinking of the HFY. The scientists worked around the clock to build devices that could capture human thought patterns and broadcast them through space. They used captured HFY technology that had been recovered from destroyed ships to create a transmission system that the aliens would not be able to ignore or block. Admiral Zekthul continued to move his fleets closer to human space, and he felt confident about the coming conquest. The HFY had faced primitive species before, and humans seemed even weaker than most. Their ships were slow and their weapons were ineffective against HFY shields and armor. But something strange was happening to HFY scouts who got too close to human communication arrays. Several ships reported unusual malfunctions in their collective consciousness systems. The affected crews experienced brief moments of confusion and disorientation that had never occurred before in HFY history. Dr. Murphy continued her research aboard the UES Defiance and made an important discovery about HFY biology. Their brains were perfectly synchronized and worked together like parts of a single massive computer. This efficiency made them incredibly powerful, but it also meant they had no experience with independent thought or creative chaos. General Webb approved Operation Mindbreak despite the risks involved. Humanity was facing extinction, and conventional weapons would not work against the HFY Empire. Their only hope was to turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength and use the beautiful chaos of human consciousness as a weapon against their enemies. The first test would begin in 12 hours, and everyone involved knew that failure would mean the end of human civilization. Private Danny Cooper sat in the laboratory chair, while Dr. Alex Chen attached electrodes to his head. The room was filled with machines that hummed and blinked with lights as they prepared to capture his thoughts and broadcast them into space. Danny felt nervous, but he also felt proud that his damaged mind might finally be useful for something important. Danny, I need you to think about your worst memories from the war, Alex said gently while checking the equipment. I know this will be painful, but we need the full chaos of human trauma to test our theory about the HFY collective consciousness. Danny closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to the battles on Mars. He remembered the screaming of wounded soldiers and the smell of burning metal and flesh. He thought about his best friend Carl, who had died in his arms during the siege of New Detroit. The memories came flooding back with all the pain and confusion he had tried so hard to forget. The machines around him began to record the electrical patterns in his brain while he relived the worst moments of his life. Dr. Chen watched the readings with fascination because Danny's thought patterns were exactly the kind of chaos they needed. Human minds experiencing trauma created neural activity that was completely random and unpredictable. 3 hours later, they were ready for the first test. A captured HFY communication device had been modified to broadcast Danny's recorded thoughts toward a small group of alien ships that were approaching the outer edge of human space. The transmission would last only 60 seconds, but it might be enough to prove their theory. The effect was immediate and shocking. The HFY ship suddenly stopped moving and began sending distress signals to their fleet commanders. On board those vessels, the crew members were experiencing something they had never felt before. The collective consciousness that connected. All their minds was being flooded with images and emotions that made no sense to them. Admiral Zekthul received the distress calls and felt confused by what his subordinates were reporting. They described feelings of sadness and fear and anger that seemed to come from nowhere. Some crew members were unable to perform their duties because their minds were filled with strange visions of alien battles and death. How can this be possible? Zekthul demanded from his flagship. The human species has no mental abilities that could affect our collective consciousness. Their minds are primitive and disorganized. But the evidence was clear that something was interfering with Kethvar brain functions. The affected ships had to withdraw from their positions because their crews could not concentrate on their assigned tasks. This had never happened before. In the entire history of the Kethvar Empire, Dr. Chen was excited by the success of the first test, but he knew they needed something even more powerful to stop the main Kethvar fleet. Danny's traumatic memories had caused confusion, but they needed to create complete mental breakdown in the alien collective consciousness. Maria Santos volunteered to be the next test subject, and she brought her art supplies into the laboratory. Maria was known for creating multiple works of art at the same time, while composing music and writing poetry in her head. Her creative process was so chaotic that even she could not explain how it worked. Dr. Chen, I want you to record my thoughts. While I am in full creative mode, Maria said while setting up her easel and musical instruments. When I am making art, my mind goes to places that even I do not understand. Alex attached the electrodes to Maria's head and started the recording equipment. Then Maria began to paint a landscape while humming a melody and composing a poem about alien stars. Her mind jumped between colors and musical notes and words in a pattern that seemed completely random, but somehow created beautiful art. The machines recording her brain activity showed patterns that were unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Maria's thoughts moved in spirals and loops that created a kind of mental chaos that was both destructive and creative at the same time. This was exactly what they needed to break the ordered thinking of the Kethvar collective mind. Captain Tony Blake volunteered to lead a dangerous mission to plant the new neural chaos devices directly onto Kethvar command ships. Tony was known for taking impossible risks and surviving situations that would kill most other humans. His team included tech specialist Kate Morgan and explosives expert Frank Williams. This mission is probably suicide, Tony told his volunteers while they prepared their equipment. But if we can get these devices close enough to their command ships, we might be able to cause enough chaos to stop their entire fleet. Kate Morgan had designed the neural chaos bombs to be small enough to attach to enemy ships without being detected. Each device could broadcast human thought patterns for several hours before burning out. Frank Williams had created explosive charges that would scatter the devices across multiple ships if their stealth mission failed. The team launched from a hidden asteroid base in a small ship that had been modified to avoid Kethvar sensors. They would have to get within 1 kilometer of the enemy command vessels to plant their devices. This meant flying through the heart of the Kethvar fleet without being detected. Meanwhile, Admiral Zekthul was trying to understand what had happened to his scout ships. The affected crews described experiencing memories that were not their own and emotions that felt alien and disturbing. Some of them were still unable to function properly even hours after the strange attack. These humans possess some kind of mental weapon that we did not expect, Zekthul told his subordinate commanders. We must be prepared for more attacks of this nature as we advance toward their home worlds. But the Kethvar had no defense against the chaos of human consciousness, because they had never encountered anything like it before. Their collective mind was designed for perfect order and efficiency. The random and emotional thoughts of humans were like poison to their synchronized brain patterns. Dr. Chen prepared to broadcast Maria's recorded creativity toward the main Kethvar fleet, while Captain Blake's team moved into position near the enemy command ships. Operation Mindbreak was about to begin in earnest, and humanity's survival depended on the beautiful chaos of human thought proving stronger than alien technology and collective consciousness. Captain Tony Blake guided his stealth ship through the massive Kethvar fleet as carefully as a surgeon performing brain surgery. Kate Morgan monitored their sensors while Frank Williams prepared the neural chaos devices for deployment. The alien ships around them were enormous and covered with weapons that could destroy their tiny vessel in seconds if they were discovered. "Tony, we are approaching the command cluster," Kate whispered, even though the aliens could not hear them through the Vacuum of space. I count 12 capital ships, including what looks like Admiral Zekthul's flagship. Frank activated the first set of neural chaos devices and prepared to launch them toward the enemy ships. Each device contained hours of recorded human thoughts, including Maria Santos's creative chaos and Danny Cooper's traumatic memories. The plan was to attach them to the hull of Kethvar vessels, where they would broadcast directly into the alien communication networks. Back on Earth, Dr. Alex Chen was coordinating the largest psychological warfare operation in human history. Thousands of volunteers from across human space had agreed to have their consciousness recorded and transmitted toward the Kethvar fleet. Professor Helen Adams had recorded her memories of losing her daughter in a transport accident. The grief and love and anger in her thoughts created patterns that no collective consciousness could process. Comedian Roy Jackson volunteered his stream of consciousness humor that jumped between topics so quickly that even humans had trouble following. His logic. Roy's mind created jokes and observations and random connections that formed a kind of mental tornado of absurdity. Jazz musician Carlos Rivera recorded himself improvising music that had no structure or predictable pattern. Begin Operation Mindbreak. General Patricia Webb ordered from the command center on Earth. Transmit all recorded consciousness patterns toward the Kethvar fleet and pray that human chaos is stronger than alien order. The transmission began and immediately started affecting Kethvar ships throughout their massive fleet. Admiral Zekthul felt the first wave of human thoughts hit, his collective consciousness like a hammer blow to his mind. Suddenly, his ordered thoughts were filled with images of a human mother crying over her dead child, and the grief was so intense that he could not focus on his military duties. Other Kethvar commanders experienced Roy Jackson's comedy routines, and their logical minds tried desperately to find meaning in jokes that were designed to be meaningless. The alien brains that had never experienced humor or irony began to malfunction as they attempted to process concepts that violated their understanding of rational thought. Carlos Rivera's jazz improvisation created the most devastating effect, of all because music was something the Kethvar had never developed. Their society was based on perfect efficiency and had no need for art or creative expression. When their collective consciousness was flooded with musical creativity that followed no rules or patterns, their mental processes began to break down completely. Captain Blake's team managed to attach their neural chaos devices to 6 command ships before being detected by Kethvar security patrols. Frank Williams detonated his explosive charges as enemy fighters closed in on their position. The blast scattered dozens of additional devices across the alien fleet, while Kate Morgan transmitted their final data back to human command. "Tony, we did it!" Kate shouted as their ship was torn apart by enemy fire. "The devices are active and broadcasting human chaos directly into their command network." The 3 humans died in the explosion, but their sacrifice multiplied the effect of Operation Mindbreak. Now, the Kethvar command ships were receiving human consciousness patterns, both from the long-range transmissions and from the devices attached to their hulls. The double dose of human mental chaos began causing complete breakdowns in alien crew members. Admiral Zekthul tried to maintain control, but his own mind was being invaded by human thoughts and emotions. He experienced Danny Cooper's war trauma and felt terror and confusion for the first time in his life. He heard Roy Jackson's absurd humor, and his logical brain tried to find patterns that did not exist. He felt Maria Santos's creative joy as she painted impossible colors, and his ordered consciousness could not understand how thoughts could be so random, yet so beautiful. Across the Kethvar fleet, similar breakdowns were occurring. Ships began firing on their own allies as crew members lost the ability to distinguish between friend and enemy. Some vessels fled in panic, while others simply stopped functioning as their crews became paralyzed by the chaos flooding their collective mind. The Kethvar had conquered 47 species, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. All previous opponents had been logical and predictable. But human consciousness was built on contradiction and chaos and creativity that made no sense to minds designed for perfect order. Some Kethvar ships tried to block the human transmissions, but the neural chaos devices attached to their hulls made this impossible. Others attempted to destroy the sources of the broadcasts, but the signals were coming from thousands of locations across human space. Dr. Chen watched the battle reports with amazement as the mighty Kethvar Empire began to collapse from psychological warfare. The aliens who had seemed invincible with their superior technology were being defeated by the very thing they considered humanity's greatest weakness. The random and chaotic nature of human thought was proving to be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. But even as victory seemed possible, Chen began to worry about the long-term effects of what they had done. The human consciousness patterns were not just confusing the Kethvar, they were fundamentally changing how their collective mind worked. Some aliens were beginning to experience individual thoughts for the first time in their species' evolution. Admiral Zek Thul felt his connection to the collective consciousness growing weaker as human chaos invaded his mind. For brief moments, he experienced something that the Kethvar had no word for. He began to have thoughts that were his alone and not shared with his entire species. The sensation was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. 6 weeks after Operation Mindbreak ended, the Kethvar Empire had completely collapsed, but the victory felt hollow to many humans. Dr. Lisa Murphy stood in a medical facility on Earth studying Kethvar prisoners who had been rescued from their damaged ships. What she saw there made her question everything humanity had accomplished in their desperate fight for survival. The Kethvar survivors were no longer connected to their collective consciousness, and the change had driven many of them insane. They wandered through the medical wards making sounds that might have been screaming or crying or laughing. Without the shared mind that had guided them for millions of years, they were lost and broken creatures who could barely function. Commander. Jake Harrison had been promoted to Admiral after the war, but he took no joy in his new rank. He walked through the medical facility with Dr. Murphy and watched the alien patients with growing horror. These beings had once been proud warriors who commanded vast fleets across the galaxy. Now they could not even feed themselves without human assistance. Lisa, what have we done to them? Jake asked, while observing a Kethvar who sat rocking back and forth while staring at nothing. We wanted to defeat them, not destroy their minds completely. Dr. Murphy had been studying the effects of human consciousness on Kethvar brain patterns for weeks. The results were both fascinating and disturbing. Some aliens had adapted to individual thought and were learning to function as separate beings. But many others had suffered complete mental breakdowns when their collective consciousness was shattered. One Kethvar named Veltar had made a remarkable recovery from his exposure to human mental chaos. Instead of madness, he had experienced what could only be called an awakening. He was learning to speak human languages and showing signs of creativity and independent thinking that amazed the human researchers. Admiral Harrison, I want to thank you for freeing me from the prison of collective thought, Veltar said during one of his interviews with Dr. Murphy. For the first time in my existence, I am able to have ideas that belong only to me. But Veltar was one of the lucky ones. Most Kethvar could not handle the isolation of individual consciousness after spending their entire lives as part of a shared mind. Lieutenant Colonel Nancy Price argued that humanity should complete the job and eliminate all remaining Kethvar before they could recover and threaten human space again. Admiral, these aliens invaded our territory and tried to enslave our entire species, Nancy said during a military briefing. We cannot show mercy to creatures who would have destroyed us without hesitation. Jake found himself disagreeing with his own officers about how to handle the Kethvar survivors. The war was over and humanity had won, but the cost of victory was becoming clear. They had not just defeated an enemy they had accidentally committed. Genocide against an entire way of life. Dr. Alex Chen was struggling with guilt about his role in Operation Mindbreak. He had weaponized human consciousness and used it to destroy the minds of thousands of intelligent beings. The fact that it had saved humanity did not make him feel better about what he had done to the Kethvar. Meanwhile, scattered groups of Kethvar, Survivors were trying to rebuild their civilization without the collective consciousness that had defined their species. A scientist named Dekmore had gathered other awakened Kethvar and was attempting to create a new society based on individual thought rather than shared minds. "We must learn to think as the humans do," Dekmore told his followers. "The chaos that destroyed our empire might also be the key to building something better." Ambassador Janet Lee was appointed to oversee diplomatic relations with the surviving Kethvar. She worked with Veltar and other awakened aliens to establish communication protocols and peace agreements. But the process was complicated by the fact that many humans still saw the Kethvar as dangerous enemies. General Patricia Webb represented the military position that all Kethvar should be relocated to distant star systems where they could not threaten human colonies. She argued that showing weakness now would invite future attacks from other alien species who might be watching how humanity dealt with defeated enemies. "We cannot allow sentiment to override security," General Webb said during government meetings about Kethvar policy. "These aliens may seem harmless now, but they could recover and seek revenge for what we did to their empire." Jake disagreed with the general's approach and believed that humanity had a responsibility to help the Kethvar adapt to their new reality. The aliens had not chosen to have their minds changed by human consciousness patterns. They were victims of a weapon that had effects no one fully understood. Dr. Murphy made a disturbing discovery while studying Kethvar brain scans. The exposure to human thoughts had not just broken their collective consciousness, it had actually rewired their neural pathways. Some Kethvar were developing brain structures that resembled human creativity centers and emotional processing areas. "Jake, I think we may have accidentally created a new species," Lisa told him while reviewing her research data. "These Kethvar are no longer the same beings that invaded our space. They are becoming something that has never existed before," the Psi. Implications of this discovery were staggering. Humanity had not just won a war, they had fundamentally altered the evolution of another intelligent species. The Kethvar who survived Operation Mindbreak were developing human-like traits while retaining their alien knowledge and abilities. Veltar demonstrated this change when he began creating art that combined Kethvar technology with human creative concepts. His paintings used colors that human eyes could not see, but arranged them in patterns that expressed emotions in ways that both species could understand. Admiral Harrison, "My people called your thoughts chaos, but I think they are actually a form of order that we never understood," Veltar explained while showing his artwork. "Your minds create beauty from randomness, and that is a power more valuable than any weapon." As humanity struggled with the moral implications of their victory, a new threat began to emerge from the depths of space. Ancient Kethvar, automated systems that had been programmed to preserve the collective consciousness, were activating across the galaxy. These machines did not understand that the war was over, and they were determined to restore the hive mind by force. The ancient machines came from the dark spaces between stars where they had waited for thousands of years. Admiral Jake Harrison received the first reports of massive automated ships approaching human space, and he knew immediately that the war was not over. These were Kethvar preservation protocols that had been programmed to restore the collective consciousness if it was ever threatened or destroyed. Veltar stood beside Jake on the bridge of the UES Defiance and studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The awakened Kethvar had become humanity's most valuable ally in understanding alien technology, but even he was frightened by what they were seeing. "Admiral Harrison, these machines were built by my ancestors to ensure that our collective mind could never be permanently destroyed," Veltar explained while pointing to the tactical display. "They carry neural reconstruction equipment that can forcibly reconnect individual Kethvar to the shared consciousness." Dr. Lisa Murphy analyzed the data from the approaching automated fleet and realized that humanity faced a threat even greater than the original Kethvar invasion. These machines were not interested in conquest or negotiation. They had one purpose, which was to restore the collective consciousness by capturing every surviving Kethvar and forcing them back into the hive mind. Captain Lucy Thompson commanded the security forces protecting Kethvar refugees on Earth, and she knew that the awakened aliens would fight to avoid being recaptured. Many of them had begun to value their individual thoughts and freedom more than their own lives. The idea of returning to the collective consciousness terrified them. "Admiral, we cannot let those machines take back the Kethvar who have learned to think for themselves," Lucy reported during an emergency military briefing. "Some of them have become friends with human colonists and are contributing valuable research to our scientific programs." But not all humans agreed with protecting their former enemies. Marcus Gray led a terrorist organization that blamed the Kethvar refugees for ongoing conflicts with other alien species. Marcus believed that showing mercy to the Kethvar made humanity look weak and would encourage future invasions. "We should hand over all the aliens to their own machines and let them sort out their problems," Marcus declared during illegal broadcasts that reached human colonies across the galaxy. "Why should human soldiers die protecting creatures that tried to enslave us just months ago?" Jake found himself caught between military leaders who wanted to use the Kethvar refugees as weapons against the preservation machines, and civilians who demanded that the aliens be handed over to avoid another war. The decision he made would determine not just the fate of the awakened Kethvar, but the future relationship between the two species. Deckmore had emerged as the leader of awakened Kethvar communities, and he offered to help humanity fight against the preservation protocols. His followers had developed new technologies that combined Kethvar engineering with human creativity in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. "Admiral Harrison, we who have tasted individual freedom will not return willingly to the collective mind," Deckmore announced during a joint Human-Kethvar Council meeting. "We choose to stand with humanity against the machines that would steal our newly awakened consciousness." Dr. Alex Chen worked with Veltar and human engineer Sophie Kim to develop weapons that could confuse the preservation machines. They discovered that the automated systems were vulnerable to the same kind of mental chaos that had destroyed the original Kethvar fleet. By broadcasting human creativity directly into machine control systems, they could cause malfunctions and system failures. The first battle occurred near the Jupiter orbital stations, where a preservation machine attempted to capture Kethvar refugees. Captain Thompson's security forces fought alongside awakened Kethvar warriors who used their knowledge of the ancient technology to disable key systems. The machine was destroyed, but not before it transmitted data about human defensive capabilities. Back to the main automated fleet, Jake realized that humanity needed more than military force to win this new war. They needed to prove that individual consciousness was worth fighting for and that the choice between collective order and individual freedom belonged to each Kethvar personally. The decisive moment came when the main preservation fleet reached Earth and began transmitting neural reconstruction signals toward the planet's surface. The awakened Kethvar had to choose between returning to the safety of collective consciousness or risking everything to maintain their individual minds. Veltar made the choice for his people by broadcasting a message to every Kethvar in the galaxy. He spoke about the beauty of individual thought and the joy of creating something that belonged only to yourself. He described the friendship he had found with humans and the art he had created with his own unique perspective. "My fellow Kethvar, we have lived for millions of years as parts of a single mind." Veltar's message reached across space to every corner of the former empire. "But we have never truly lived as ourselves until now. I choose freedom over safety and chaos over order because that is what makes life worth living." The response surprised everyone, including the preservation machines. Thousands of Kethvar across the galaxy chose to reject the neural reconstruction signals and maintain their individual consciousness. They fought against their own automated systems using human tactics and creative strategies that the machines could not predict or counter. Admiral Jake Harrison led the combined human and awakened Kethvar fleet in the final battle against the preservation protocols. The ancient machines were powerful and numerous, but they were programmed to restore order, not to fight against beings who chose chaos over efficiency. Dr. Chen's neural chaos weapons proved devastatingly effective against the automated systems. When the machines tried to process human creativity and Kethvar individual thought simultaneously, their logic circuits overloaded and shut down. The preservation fleet was defeated not by superior firepower, but by the power of conscious choice. In the aftermath of the Second War, humanity and the awakened Kethvar began building a new kind of civilization together. Veltar worked with human, artists and scientists to create technologies and art forms that neither species could have imagined alone. The chaos of human thought combined with Kethvar precision created innovations that benefited both civilizations. Jake reflected that humanity's greatest victory had not been defeating a powerful enemy, but proving that consciousness itself was worth preserving. The choice between order and chaos, between collective efficiency and individual freedom, belonged to every thinking being in the universe. And when given that choice, most beings chose the beautiful, unpredictable chaos of thinking for themselves.